Welcome, workers and friends. Welcome back to the continuing interview series on anti imperialist America. I'm your host, Dust James, the Marxist Leninist truck driver. I'm coming to you live from my humble home in rural North Carolina. And I'm very honored today to have a very inspiring guest, David Cedillo of San Angelo Solidarity. How are things down in Texas this evening?
Oh, things are hot. Things are heat. That's for dang sure.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I like that, folks. I've been to Texas. I've been all 48, and Texas is one of my favorite states. It's well, I mean, it's almost like several different countries. No, it's so big, it's so massive. Yeah. What do you think, man? You've been there all your whole life.
Oh yeah, literally. There's such a diversity of it. You go one way, drive 5 miles or 5 hours that way, it's a desert. Five hours the other way, you're over there in a swamp. It is a large state, and I think that's a lot of the problems that face us right now with like trying to organize in Texas. Just
Mm,
such long distances between everyone. It's like
mm.
hours that way, 5 hours this way if you want to do anything. So it's a beautiful state, that's for sure. It's a lot of potential.
Well, I hear you, brother. So this is your first time on the program on anti-imperialist America or working class revolt. So some of my guests might be unfamiliar with your work. Recently, Caleb Maupin and the Center for Political Innovation um, posted a video of you speaking at a conference on the West Coast. And I recommend everybody go and watch that video. It's very inspiring. But for my viewership that, you know, doesn't know much about you, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. This is a political show, so maybe how you came in to politics and what got you involved in the Center for Political Innovation and some of your work recently.
All right, cool. Well, I think for starters, I got a lot of my background from my Catholic upbringing.
Mm,
I get a lot of my big moral feelings from that I feel like people deserve to have everything that they need because that's something that Jesus would want to give. That's something that I was taught very young growing up, that people deserve to live in dignity and you should love thy neighbor no matter what. And I saw that that wasn't necessarily how things were going on the ground, and I felt a lot of confusion with that. And then also, very early on in my life, my father, he was the hardest working man that I've ever known. He would work for Sprint, and he would be the top sales manager in the state, the region, number 16 in the entire United States. This guy would get so
mm,
many plaques and medals and all these awards, and they would say, "Oh, you're doing the best, David, and you're this and this and this and all this stuff." And the man would work himself so hard. He would have so much anxiety that he would bite up his fingernails and they would be bleeding. And he never saw it as something that was like awful and something that he didn't want to do. He wanted to provide for his family. He wanted to give everything he could for his family. That's just the kind of guy he was. And when 2008 came around, we lost our house in the
mm,
housing crisis. This really shook me to my core because I was told my whole life growing up that if you wanted to get things, you just had to work hard. Then you'll have everything and everything will be just all right. But I could see that clearly the hardest working man that I have ever known, he just lost everything. He had to sell his car, he had to sell his home. And for what? I couldn't put my finger on it. And now growing up, knowing all of that I do, knowing how capitalism intersects with all these different kinds of sectors of the market and sectors of even your own mental health and your own philosophy in the world, the way the capitalist system made him feel was that everything was his fault, that he just had to blame himself, that he had to look inwards, that he didn't have to look outwards. And he internalized that a lot. He really
mm,
did blame himself. I really felt aghast by that because I'd seen this man get up every day and bite his fingernails off and have to take all these medications just to try to sleep because he had so much anxiety. And that really struck me to my core. And then I'm sure you'll hear this story a lot. 2016 came around, and the Bernie campaign was a big thing. And I literally just turned 18 at the time. So that was the first time I really like started looking into anything political. And I heard this like big progressive message, something that I hadn't heard my whole life, because I know that I rejected all the extremely conservative like propaganda growing up, but I didn't have any form to that. I didn't have any feeling to that. And I think that's where a lot of people here are, especially in Texas and San Angelos, that they have these vaguely progressive ideas, but they don't have any form or shape to give it to them. So they fall into like either right wing libertarian traps or maybe liberal traps. And I thought that, man, with all these people feeling the same way I do, and all these people that are having these progressive ideas, maybe there can be something out of this. And that's what really inspired me with the Bernie campaign, just seeing all these people coming together. And then in that very same time frame, Fidel Castro died. And at that point, I was like a lib. I was just listening to Bernie, and I was campaigning for Bernie and donating for him and all of that. I was really passionate about it. I thought it really was a solution. And I was watching a lot of like I'm sure you've heard of them, like the Young Turks and stuff like that at the time. And it's so funny because all they would talk about would be how corporations are destroying this country and corporate greed and this and this and that. And I looked at that situation when Fidel died, and I thought, well, maybe I should look into this Cuba thing. Who is this Fidel guy? What is all these things socialism? What is it really about? Because as a lib, you get called a socialist all the time, especially here in Texas and online and all that. So maybe I am. Maybe I'll check out this guy, and all I could see is American interests, American capitalists, corporations, as they would like to say. They don't like to use the capitalist word because it drums up too much fervor of what's really going on, but they'll say the corporate part was just American interest going into Cuba and completely ravaging that country and making it a background banana farm slash casino slash place of debauchery. And that really opened my eyes to seeing that maybe all the narratives I've heard about all these socialist countries being so bad and so evil, maybe it's not true, because I've seen how American ideology is destructive and very firsthand. Yeah, working hard doesn't give you everything that you need in your life, even though it's told you over and over and over again. Hardworking people, like my grandparents, for instance, they're some of the hardest working people I know, and they don't have a lot to show for it. They don't have Bezos levels of infinite wealth and all this. They have just enough to get by. They have enough to do what they need to do, but that's about it. And I really saw that with looking into different socialist countries, that there was a possibility for a different kind of future. And with that being said, I felt really alienated because I knew that there wasn't a lot of people around me who had that same sort of outlook. We're all in this vaguely progressive state, but not everyone's found socialism yet. Found that just talking to regular people, and I have to give a lot of credit to my partner, Christina Garcia. She helped me so much with being able to open up and talk to people. And I think that's really like a big part of socialism that may be missing from a lot of socialists of the left, is just the basic part of the word, just being social, just getting out there, talking to real people about things you believe in, and talking to them on a real personal basis and following up with them on that and really getting those cogs moving, because you're not going to convince somebody to be a socialist the first time you talk to them. That's never going to happen. What you are going to do is you're going to be able to change their mind and open their mind up to these ideas. It's a slow rolling process that you have to be committed to. And working with Christina and all of SAS, like just growing from me and her to 4 members to 5 members to 10 members, and now we're pushing members. Like it really is just being social and being real with people and talking about optimistic things. Like a good friend, Robert Lawrence, he said to me the other day, it's not about trying to convince people like from the first start that, oh yeah, you're a communist. You have to move them even from a hostile position to a neutral position, like that's progress. And that's the kind of progress we need to be focusing on making, because even in normal people, like not everybody is going to be a communist, even like in communist societies. So you have to be able to talk to these people about the positives of socialism. Because when I talk to a lot of these like more unknowledgeable, vaguely progressive people about socialism, maybe they'll, or communism, I say the words right outright, they'll get scared. But if I talk about the achievements of socialist nations, how the USSR, only 5% of their income was spent on housing, and how things worked there, and how China is pushing for these new things like the Belt and Road Initiative and mining helium-3 from the moon to try to do fission energy experiments. Like when you talk to people about the positives and you don't get bogged down in the negative, dreary, you just talked about the positive achievements of socialism, it really opens up the door for these kinds of conversations to not turn into pissing matches and yelling contests. And that's a big thing we practice here. We're not like a big online presence, because a lot of online conversation gets really toxic. But when you have real one-on-one conversations with people, that's where you like make real change in people's hearts, because you having that personal connection, showing people that they're not alone, and that their feelings of these like vaguely progressive ideas aren't just things that they can say, oh well, nothing's ever going to happen, nothing's ever going to change, because that's bullshit, man. Because I used to feel like that, and apparently everybody else feels like that too. And all it takes is just that initiative to just go out and say, well, fuck, man, I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. And just talking to your friends and then opening up these ideas and trying not being very patient with people. Being very patient with people. That's very important, especially when it's funny. Christina says this a lot. Sometimes it's easier to talk to right wingers than it is to talk to libs. Like the way they just the things they believe in are vaguely. It's like they want socialism, but they think socialism is like Trump 2024 or something. They want to see all the Americans lifted up, but what they think that is something completely wrong to the answer. Like I feel like a lot of them are a lot more critical of the way things are versus like the liberals, which is sad to see, which is very interesting, because we're actually picking up a lot more people. We're picking up a lot more people with like more different understandings, like not as far as over there as we are, but we're trying really hard to work with these people and try to make them come to our position and slowly roll them into what we're doing. Because over here in San Angelo, especially, we have a big lane. There's no other like real leftist org around here. So that gives us a huge opportunity to be able to go out and just basically get people to our position and try to convince them that, hey, Marxism, Leninism, the 21st century isn't some evil, scary thing. This is the way future for progress for humanity, because if not, we're going to just destroy ourselves with the exploitation of resources and irrationalities of the market. And basically, it's honestly, it's the most rewarding experience I've ever had. Like, I can tell you, before I felt really alone and alienated, like I said before, but now, like, having so many good friends and good comrades now, just it completely changes everything, man. Like it feels really good to get out and just talk to people and organize. Not even if you're having like, even for instance, at San Angelo Solidarity did security for one of the women's marches here in San Angelo this upcoming last Saturday, and we were able to go out there and we amazing dynamic speeches on Marxist feminism from Christina, really amazing. And Damien, one of our newer members, also gave a speech. And after that, and we did security for the march, and we actually had some fascist agitators. I don't put that word around lightly. I looked up this guy. He's like an actual, like legit, like fascist militia dude. And he was an agitator, and we were able to separate him from the crowd and really show people that we're like the organized force there, trying to make sure everything goes smoothly. And a lot of people were really receptive to that. We got a huge explosion in membership over this past weekend just because we're out there in the community showing ourselves, being like, we're here, we're strong, we're organized, and we are here to represent the community.
Very powerful, brother. I am deeply inspired by what you're doing down there in San Angeles. Man, I attempted to organize here in middle rural North Carolina, and I think we tried to do May Day one year. We ended up getting. It's interesting. We ended up getting my partner at the time. Well, I have a lot of friends from Mexico, and we ended up inviting we got some folks down from Greensboro, and we got like my brother's friends, and we got my friend and her brother had a Mexican band, and we did like a rock number and a Mexican thing music number, and there was like 10 people, and we sat around and tried to talk about unions and stuff, but some of the people were like all over the place. I think some of the my brother's musician friends were like, it's all about music, man. Shut up about unions. I just want to hear about music. And there was a language barrier. And I did most of my organizing really in Greensboro, which is, more of an urban area. So I think it's apt. And I have trouble reaching out to, rural folks. And I think there's a real class divide. We tried to get, working class and, mostly Mexican folks involved in the environmentalist movement with anti-fracking. And we noticed it was heavily dominated by mostly middle class, liberals who, back the Democrats and stuff. And it was like, oh my God, who would and they seemed to be mobilized whenever there was a Republican, but then, and same thing with the anti-war movement. A lot of, I'm right next to I'm right next to a military base. And, I think, they've changed leadership, but I think I remember pushing them to come out under Obama. And then recently when I was remobilized, I kind of took some time off. They had outright Democratic organizers at the anti-war demonstration. I wonder how, and I haven't seen them do anything since since that. But I mean, it's absolutely inspiring. You said you got over 10 people. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the work your group, a little bit about your group and some of the activities you guys been doing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll give you a rundown of the history. So we started in early January of this year. We started out as just a reading group. We were starting off reading State and Revolution, and then we started the CPI manual shortly after. But about a month into State and Rev, we had a really big water crisis happen in our town. The CPI manual, that book's fire. But we had a really big water crisis in our town, and basically acetone, methylamine, benzene, and a long list of ABCD chemical solvents were getting pumped into the water supply, like thousands of gallons per day. So the entire city's water supply was contaminated. And as Americans do, just like with the pandemic when it just started, how all the toilet paper was gone on all the shelves, you couldn't find any. It was the exact same thing with bottled water. You couldn't any water anywhere because before the crisis I never realized how important water is to you. If you don't have water, you can't cook, you can't clean yourself, you can't brush your teeth, you can't do anything, you can't drink. Your whole life basically comes to a halt if you don't have clean water, especially if you got to think if you got grandkids, you got kids, they all need all this sorts of stuff. You can't do anything with the water. It was even a do not use if you boil it, because that's those chemical solvents. It didn't matter if you boiled them. If you boil them, it just made them more active. So it was just a complete disaster. And the response from the city was so extremely lackluster. It was incredibly just how a whole city doesn't act so quickly. They take them 3 to 4 days to actually spring into action. And the day after that we heard that the crisis was going on, we sprung into action that very morning, because the thing had actually been going on for like a week. The city had been getting reports from people that their water was smelling awful. It had this like gasoline / mothball smell to it. That was basically all the chemical solvents in it. So we took it upon ourselves. We said, well, you know what? We read all this theory. We talk about wanting to make the world a better place, and we want about talk about organizing our community. We got to go out there and do it. You know, Caleb Maupin always says politics is all about timing. You have to go and seize the moment, and that's what we did. We got 5 vehicles about over about a week and a half. We made multiple trips outside of San Angelo because, for one, there was no water in San Angelo, and for two, if there was any water, we didn't want to take that opportunity for people who were able-bodied and had a car to go and purchase that water. So we went to all the little surrounding towns around Angelo, 45 minutes away, an hour away, and bought up as much water as we could, and we're able to deliver it directly to working class people and disabled people. Like, we were getting calls all day long, just people like saying like, oh, my grandparents, they don't have Facebook, but they have 3 grandkids at their house and they can't bathe them and they can't feed them. Can you please drop off some cases? It was just that nonstop all day long for all that whole week. It was really crazy because we just hit the ground running, and we really didn't stop until the big freeze happened, which is crazy because we went from literally the water crisis still going on to the big freeze in Texas happening. I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone here about the big freeze. Everyone's heard about it. Just complete shutdown of infrastructure in Texas, just a complete crippling, isolating cold. It was just completely monumental. And our group, we had so much momentum because we'd been on the ground every single day, and we were like, okay, well, this is just something else we have to tackle. What are we going to do? And we found out there wasn't really much we could do. We were still a fairly new org. Like at our own house, they said they were going to do rolling blackouts to help save the city's power, and that it was going to be from 1 o'clock in the night, 1 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the morning, and that was it. That's how long our power was going to go out. Our power went out at 1 o'clock in the morning and didn't come on for 5 days. So at that point, it was 40 degrees in our house that very same morning when we woke up. So we immediately couldn't stay there. We had to take our animals. We had to go over to a comrade's house. Thankfully, they had power. It was just really the luck of the draw kind of thing. And at that point, we felt so bad because we had to focus like internally when we wanted to go out there and actually help people and try to help organize, but we didn't have the proper snow equipment. We couldn't build houses for people and heat them in an instant. We couldn't fix the power grid. It really showed us that if we want to be effective at giving working class people relief and showing them that socialists are here to help people and not be some boogeyman, that we're actually just regular members of the community, that we have to be able to build this sort of infrastructure to be able to help working class people in times of crisis. Because if not, it's going to be the city with their lackluster disaster where they let working class, poor Latino communities just fall through the crack. That's what we were seeing on the ground all the whole time. It was just a really eye-opening experience for such a young org to go through, and we were able to grow a lot through it. I really do believe that, and especially we're going to be preparing for that upcoming now because, as you know, it's not like Texas got a whole new power grid in the past 8 months. It's still the same one, and this winter upcoming is expected to be just as cold, if not colder, than the freeze that just happened. So we're already doing disaster preparedness to make sure that we can effectively have a strategy to help people out that happen. You hear that?
Yeah. I think the connection's going in and out. I think you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
man. I think that's a lot of folks. I mean, a lot of people's initial reaction to the disaster is, want to help people. I I think there was some big NPR guy who was telling a story about, a bunch of folks got stuck on the highway in Pennsylvania, and some rednecks came out on their four-wheelers giving out bottled water to them. It's a response, that people want to do, but to see a group that's studying socialism and taking upon themselves to go out and help. So you went out of town, you got water with your own funds or gathered funds and brought it to the people that didn't have water, and then continued that up. and remain that infrastructure. I mean, that is beautiful. A lot of, my experience with activism is, especially being around the protest cage and the liberal movement, is everybody just wants to talk about whatever the hell MSNBC, whatever the hot issue is, whatever is in the news at the time. And it seems to go along with, whatever bills they're trying to get passed, or trying to put up a campaign or a political objective. And it flares up and it goes away,
Mhm.
and organizations come up and organizations go away. And it seems like none of them had real roots in the community. And I think, that is exactly what we need. I think it was either Fred, I think it was Fred Hampton who said, it's the party's task to, show the people with words and work, how to do prolonged resistance. And I think you're doing exactly what needs to be done. I mean, that's half the battle right there. You don't know how many people have dedicated years to the Democratic Party, to this liberal org, to that NGO, and see no good come for their community. And you have already found and built a community-based organization that can work on multi issues. That's truly inspiring. Maybe you can tell us some more of the work you guys have been doing.
Yeah, for sure. But first, I want to really agree with that point you made because, especially, in my short time of being in the political movement, I'm sure y'all guys have a lot more years under your belt. But I saw that with my very own eyes here with the BLM protests. And some liberals got out in front of it and they made it all about their egos and they didn't have any roots in the community and it just instantly fizzled away. So I definitely just wanted to agree with that last little point you said there. And regarding other works that we've done, another one of the things that we do is we do care packages for the homeless community because we
Mm,
feel like the homeless community is the most affected by the problems of capitalism right now in our country. So giving them just basic dignity, essentially basic relief, is what we do. We give them small care packages filled with socks, dental hygiene equipment, feminine hygiene stuff, combs, brushes, just things like that, little bits of food that's non-perishable so it won't go bad on them, stuff like that, just so they can live in dignity because it's rough out there. There's 6 empty houses for every homeless person. It's just completely irrational that these people have to be out on the streets. And I think just doing stuff like that, it's not only one good for your soul, but it's also good for getting out to the community and just directly talking to people and talking to people who are affected by the issue because we talk about the crises of capitalism all the time, but those people are experiencing the crisis of capitalism every single second, every night that they have to sleep under a bridge and they don't have anywhere to go, they don't have any food in their bellies. Those are the people that we felt like needed the most direct relief at the moment. And another thing that we do, well, something I wouldn't say it's something we do, it's something we fell into, was a few months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, there was a really big incident at a cemetery here locally. It was run by the Catholic Diocese of San Angelo, and it was called Calvary Cemetery. And basically, what happened is the management there had been cutting corners. They cut every corner you could think of. They usually get this professionally trained group called the Knights of Columbus or something, I believe, to go out and clean up the cemetery because they know how to take the proper precautions with sacramental items and all these different things, be respectful to the people who have passed. But what the cemetery found to do was just pick up just random people up off the street to do the work. And I'm not knocking the dude just trying to make a buck, trying to feed his family, getting a little bit of work off the street. But I am going to knock the management who knowingly put people out there and made such bad outcomes happen. Because what they did is they went through and they ripped up everything. They ripped up
mm,
things that had been there for 20 plus years. They ripped up literal tombstone grave markers. So there's literal unmarked graves in that cemetery right now, and people don't know where they are. And they ripped up flags, mementos, little crosses, rosaries. Well, I think one of the most disrespectful things they did was they actually got all these a huge trash bag full of crosses and flowers, and to tie up the trash bag they used a rosary to tie it up. Like yeah, I'm not a particularly religious man myself, but I know that is effed up, and I would never think about disrespecting anyone's religion or sacramental personal memento they left for their loved one like that, ever. Even my worst enemy, I wouldn't do that to. That is just straight disrespect. And that's what we saw with the community, because we were out there. They left everything on the street by the dumpster instead of taking it away. Like I said, they cut every corner possible. They didn't take the trash and move it away. They just left it in a huge pile in the street. So everyone was seeing that. So what SAS did is we thought, this is disgusting. All these people are so angry because all their loved one mementos had been thrown away like they were just trash. And it wasn't just a regular cleanup. I know what a regular cleanup is, and that was not it. And we were there all day long sorting out all the mementos. We were getting all the nameplates. We were getting all the flowers in a pile. We're getting all the little lights, all the little stands, all the little flags, all the little crosses, all the little angels. We're getting them all set up in a nice, orderly fashion along the street. And all day long, we're having people roll up because they were seeing what was going on online, and they were there to look for their family's mementos. They were there looking for pictures. They were looking for stones. They were looking for beer bottles that they given to their homies who had passed. They were looking for all that stuff. I remember in particular there was a woman who spent $400, no, it was $300 on a stone for her husband that had just passed. She put it there a week ago, and she drove in all the way from Dallas to go and look for it. She was there with us for 2 days. She couldn't find it, but we found it eventually at the end, thankfully. But it took her so long to get that, and a lot of people didn't get their stuff back. And we were there talking to families and really organizing them and using their righteous anger to put pressure on the Catholic diocese. We made a petition. We got about 800 plus signatures, and then we organized a demonstration there the next day to show our concern and show that people weren't happy and that we wanted to seek reform in the policies. And what I really liked about this is it wasn't, there was no D party out there. There's no R party out there. It was just SAS out there, just getting people organized and showing people that they have real community power. And we brought up the property question, because when you really think about it, it's our family members down there. We paid for the plots. It's ours right to put what we want on their tombstones and grieve how our family members the way we feel like we should be able to. And that's what we brought up. And the cemetery's response to that is, oh, well, you just own what's on top of the ground. You don't own anything below. It's like, that's our family member down there. Like, this is a little ridiculous. Or that's opposite. They own what's below. We own what's below the ground. They own what's on top. So it was just a really big dispute, and we were able to make a really heart-moving testimonial video interview of all of the people that were there to voice their concern. And one thing that one elderly man said really stuck with me is he said, out there you have people protesting for different things all the time. You got people protesting for Black people, for workers' rights. You got people protesting against this pipeline or this thing. But who's out here for us? None of them. They ain't out for us. It's y'all out here for us. It's SAS who's out here for us. And just stuff like that, just getting directly to working class people in their communities and like giving their form real passion. Giving their passion real form, because all of them were so incredibly angry, but they didn't have the experience, I guess, it sounds a little pretentious, but the Marxist analysis to see like we have to organize and like show our solidarity and try to get change like through our people power, like that sort of lens. And they're really responsive to all that. They thought, wow, y'all guys are out here standing up for us. And that's one of the other activities we did. And let's see, most recently we did security at the local women's march. It was a good opportunity for us to do outreach and also get training for doing security. We had all the proper equipment. We were there just to make sure nothing goes wrong, no agitators, no nothing, just make sure everything goes smoothly and win people over to our message using, Marxist analysis and not just lib stuff. We were there to actually try to push what we are. And we did an amazing job. The Christina gave a dynamic speech that was just completely amazing. Everybody loved it. And off of that, we were able to get so much more interest for the group. I think we got 9 more members just off of that yesterday alone. So it's just like a huge explosion in membership. And it really shows you just getting out there and talking to regular people, like being in the community, is showing them that you're like an organized force for good that does so much for organizing. Just like I said earlier at the beginning, just getting social, getting out there with real kinds of people.
Wow, very powerful testimony. That is absolutely amazing. And it also so you guys were studying the manual along with State and Revolution.
Oh yeah,
So this all started with a study group.
yeah, literally.
Yeah,
It,
Mao started with a study group, and now it became the biggest political party in human history.
Jeez.
And the second largest economy. I mean, I'm tired of folks. I mean, just over a year ago, I kind of took some time off from the movement, and I drove, got married, and was trying to provide for my wife. Recently had my son, but a little bit before that, you know, um, when my main issue had always been being anti-war. That's how I started. That's how I got into socialism. I think I got to credit Cindy Sheehan for doing the final push. I was against the war, and I heard some liberals who were sitting around talking about how Cindy Sheehan had betrayed America. These are liberals. These are John Kerry claiming anti-war folks. This was this is 2003, 2004.
uh,
Okay, and and they're like, oh, Cindy Sheehan, we're anti-war. We're gonna vote, the Democrat. But Cindy Sheehan has gone way too far because she went to go visit Hugo Chavez. And
oh,
I'm
that was the,
thinking, who is this Hugo Chavez? And ever since then, I've had a positive light of Hugo Chavez. It's one of my great heroes and put me on the path to socialism. I've met a lot of folks. I've been through a lot of things, but man, I think you have a very inspiring story, and I think you're doing amazing work. And it all started with a study group. And I want to encourage everybody that's watching or listening. You can get these copies in bulk if you email calebmoppin at gmail.com. We have already on my channel. I have already studied the complete second section. So there's some discussing there and some read throughs to go over. But essentially, I want you to start a study group. If you know 2 people, if you know 3 people, if it's in person or if it's online, even if it's online, I mean, that's how I, came back in this period. I think what reactivated me was the assassination of Soleimani, the beloved general, the great fighter against ISIS. They murdered the person who'd been the one defeating the terrorist. It kind of woke me back up, and I saw all these young folks, out there and ready to struggle. And I met a lot of folks, amazing folks that started with that. I've been doing this YouTube show, both work and study meetings. So I want to just put it out there to everybody watching this right now or watching this later, that you can do something and you can make a difference. And brother David Cedillo out there, young man, has already been through a few campaigns, directly involved with the people, has started his study group, and it's absolutely amazing. So I want you to Start a study group, talk with your friends, do a YouTube show, do studies online, whatever you got to do. One of a very, I think, back in my organizing, I had very good training, with legacy going back to, labor movement and the 1930s and 40s Communist Party, which you have taken a page out of history and what you're doing, because that's exactly what the Communist Party was back in the day. I think a lot of people, when they hear, oh, communists, you think about the Trotskyites, like I encountered at my school. And, they're a bunch of liberal, mostly middle class folks. And, and they hated all the actually existing socialist countries.
Mm-hmm.
And they sit around and they go out to a nice fancy restaurant and buy books from Haymarket Books, and never really get to the community. And that's kind of like and they real hyper on social issues that, a lot of rural communities are kind of conservative on, even though they're economically exploited. They might be turned off by some of these social issues. So I noticed there's been a real disconnect with mostly middle class urban folks who call themselves socialists, and the masses of people whose conditions are getting worse and worse. And people don't know the history. I mean, Caleb got a good book on the history of the Communist Party. That this is what socialist organizing was. When the Communist Party had mass, they would organize folks if someone was getting evicted, people would show up and stop them from getting evicted. This is what got us unemployment insurance, was organizing unemployed people to demand bread. They give us a job or give us bread, people. I'm putting a lot of ideas out there, brother. Are you feel any of my sentiments? Anything to add to some of these ideas?
Yeah, man. First of all, I wanted to say about the study group and the reading group is, yeah, just go out there and do it. It's really, it may sound awkward or boring or something like that, but honestly, every single session that we've had with the CPI study manual has just turned into a big, like, brainiac, like bouncing off each other, talking about subject to subject, to passion, to story. Like, it's fun. It's to just like pick people's brains and talk to them about these different ideas. Like, I really got to throw a lot of respect to Robert and Caleb, who made the manual and made the questions so good and so dynamic. And I know they're only just going to get better as time goes on with the second edition of the manual that'll come out here fairly and eventually, I hope soon, because SAS has already read the whole dang manual. So now we're looking on what to do with that, because after reading the whole thing with the whole group, I can tell you right now that it's a great time. Or you get a lot of meaningful discussions, you learn a lot of new things. And I guess the biggest thing whenever you do have these study sessions is just to make sure you're always having conversations in good faith, because not everyone's going to want to agree with you all the time, and not everyone's going to want to see things the way you do every single second of the time, and that's fine. And you just got to be intelligible and talk to these people, and that's really important. And to what else you were saying is, yeah, I really respect like all the work you're doing up here on your channel with trying to read out the manual and getting that out to a broad audience, because that works really well too. Like, you're getting a lot of views on that, and that gets out to people, and people have the ability to think about that, and then that also sparks the potential for them to go out and do their own study session. So it's I forget the word, but it multiplies very quickly and it spreads out, and it really is how it works. And it's just up to people like us just getting out there and trying to do those things. And I thank you a lot for the praise. I'm not too good at taking praise, but I really appreciate you, brother, and I really respect the work you're doing out there too, man. And also, just one last thing to add, that book that you said, Caleb Maupin's History of the Communist Party, that is a fire read. That I learned a lot of things from that book. Stuff you wouldn't hear about, like how they would throw marbles at the course cops whenever they were striking and stuff like that. Just crazy stuff you wouldn't even think about. Like, it's a great book. I love it.
Well, I think that's going to do it for today. I came up with a slogan myself recently: "Make Marxism working class again," and I believe that is exactly what we're doing. You know, people we're facing worse and worse conditions. People looking for answers, and brother David Cedillo out down there in Texas is getting the people involved in socialism, man. So I think we're going to end it on a chant. I'm going to say, "Out of the movement," and you say, "To the masses." Ready? Um,
Yeah.
Out of the movement.
To the
Out of the
masses.
movement.
To the
All right.
masses.
Good night, everyone.